hello, everyone.
Hello.
And I extend a very warm welcome to all of you who are joining us today, hopefully from around the world. I know we have our colleagues in Japan where it's 10 p.m., colleagues here in New York, and hopefully even a few people getting up early on the West Coast of the United States. But wonderful to be here. And thank you for joining us for what I think is going to be a very important discussion on accelerating digital transformation to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. And my name is Jane Nelson, and I direct the Corporate Responsibility Initiative at Harvard University's Kennedy School of Government. And I'd like to just start by recognizing and saying thank you to our hosts for today's discussion who have brought us all together. KEIDANREN, which many of you will know is Japan's business federation, with a membership of over 1,400 of Japan's leading companies, as well as 109 nationwide business associations. But I think very importantly, KEIDANREN has been one of the outstanding pioneers for over 30 years now in both making a business case for sustainable development and also setting guidelines and expectations for its member companies on how to take practical, measurable action. And so it's wonderful to have KEIDANREN team with us, and thank you for bringing us all together. And we'll be hearing today about KEIDANREN's most current framework for action, Society 5.0, which focuses very much on combining digital transformation with business model innovation and partnership and sustainable investment and finance to deliver solutions to the Sustainable Development Goals. And I think it obviously goes without saying that that combination is more crucial and it's more challenging than it's ever been as we all continue to grapple with and start rebuilding from the devastating impacts of COVID-19. And I think it's particularly important in four areas. First, in terms of how we can all work together, business, government, civil society, on protecting and improving people's lives, their health, their safety, their access to basic needs and basic services. Secondly, on supporting people's livelihoods and their jobs and their income. Thirdly, on sustaining people's learning and their ability to access education and skills development, and particularly keeping children in school. And fourth, strengthening people's long-term resilience and their ability to thrive and survive, not only dealing with shocks like the pandemic, but also climate change, and also to survive and thrive in a world of massive digital and economic transformation. So I think that's what our goal is, people's lives, livelihoods, learning, and long-term resilience. And despite all the uncertainty, there can be absolutely no doubt that one of the single most important sets of pathways to achieve any of those goals and the Sustainable Development Goals is digital transformation. Clearly, the pandemic has accelerated and scaled the pace of digital transformation already, but we need to do even more as we move forward. And I think the two key leadership challenges that I hope we can unpick and focus on today are, first of all, how do we accelerate and scale innovation, both digital innovation, but also innovation in life sciences and other technologies and business models and financing mechanisms, so that we can harness the incredible potential of the digital economy for as many people as possible. And linked to that, how do we address the very real and difficult challenge of the digital divide or digital gaps and digital inequality? And so hopefully we'll be able to unpick opportunities to both accelerate and scale digital innovation, as well as address the challenge of digital equity, so that we don't have millions of people left even further behind. We have a wonderful panel to get our discussion going today, and I will quickly introduce them. First, Mr. Takashi Hibeno, who is the chairman of the board of Daiwa Securities and also the vice chair of the board of councillors at KEIDANREN. Mr. George Nakayama, who is the Senior Advisor and former CEO of Daiichi Sankyo, which, as many of you will know, is one of the world's leading pharmaceutical companies. And George also chairs the KEIDANREN Committee for Responsible Business Conduct and Promoting the SDGs. Ms. Sunita Grote, who is the co-lead of Unicef Ventures, a very exciting sort of innovation unit that has been set up within Unicef, within the UN system, and a great example of the UN finding innovative new models as well as technologies. And then Ms. Michelle Edkins, who is the Global Managing Director of BlackRock's investment stewardship team, and you work very much on engaging with the many companies that BlackRock invests in around ESG and responsible business issues. So it's wonderful to have the four of you with us today. Just a point of housekeeping, it's great to see we have many of you joining us online. Each of our panelists will share some initial comments and presentation around digital transformation for the SDGs, and then we will open up to discussion. So hopefully we'll have some time for questions from the audience. Please put your questions in the chat box, and we look forward to hearing from some of you from around the world. So without further ado, Takashi, if we could start with you, and if you could just give us an initial overview of Society 5.0 and some of the things that you're doing both through the KEIDANREN and Daiwa Securities to move the agenda forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Jen. Thank you so much. It's a great honor to be able to connect with all of you remotely, even we are still in such a situation. First of all, I'd like to share our vision for the future society, what we call Society 5.0 for SDGs, which Japan is promoting in order to use the power of digital technologies to overcome chronic social challenges and create a sustainable society. We have learned two big lessons from the COVID-19 pandemic. The first is the importance of sustainability. The pandemic has caused social and economic uncertainty around the world. To build back better, we need cooperation, not division. And the SDGs is the excellent roadmap for this vision. And the second is the need for digitalization. We have seen how much digital technologies help our daily life during the pandemic. Telework, telemedicine, and web-based education will become a springboard for social change. Sustainability and digitalization, but should we address these as separate issues? The answer is, of course, no. We need to utilize the power of digital technologies to create a sustainable and inclusive society. We call this vision Society 5.0. This concept goes beyond the industry reforms and aims for transformation to build a better society. Realizing Society 5.0 will boost annual GDP by more than $2.5 trillion in Japan alone. It's also expected to contribute to delivering on the SDGs around the world. To provide people with an image of this vision, KEIDANREN has set up a platform called Theater 5.0, which gathers videos related to Society 5.0 from member companies. I hope you will take a look at them later. The realization of Society 5.0 requires changes, not only in companies, but also in investors. Specifically, this change entails the evolution of ESG investment. Please take a look at this graph. The volume of ESG investment is expanding year by year. However, in terms of quality, there appears to be little investment in problem-solving innovation. In this regard, KEIDANREN has collaborated with the world's largest pension fund, Japan's GPIF, and the University of Tokyo to publish a report. The report shows that investment in the realization of Society 5.0 and problem-solving innovation through the evolution of ESG investment is essential to the achievement of SDGs. In addition, the three parties have presented an action plan for the future. Based on these efforts, Daiwa Securities launched Daiwa Society 5.0 Fund in July. This fund encourages investment in global companies to solve problems in fields such as electric vehicles, food wastage, and genetic disorders. It's a financial product targeting both economic and social returns. The financial industry also needs to accelerate specific action aimed at realizing Society 5.0 for SDGs. I conclude my presentation with a wish for today's forum to be a starting point of the collaboration between us at the next stage. Thank you very much.
Great. No, thank you, Takashi-san. And I think two very, very important points and great examples there. One, the question of what individual financial institutions, banks, asset managers, securities firms can do to set up their own innovation funds, ESG funds in a highly competitive way and compete with each other for people's dollars to invest and invest them in very specific technology-based solutions to the Sustainable Development Goals. But then secondly, this great opportunity and this excellent example of collaboration within the industry to further research and analysis and data that could lift the entire industry forward. And so your example of the partnership with GPIF and University of Tokyo, I think is a great example of every business association in the world and bank association or investment group did joint research with leading universities on making the case, for technological transformation and digital transformation, could help to move the agenda forward. So we have evidence-based policy advocacy as well as practice at the individual level. So thank you for those great examples, and I think it leads very well. And I'll sort of come back because I want to unpick some of those in a bit more detail. But I think let's go next, Georgia. We can go to you, and to just sort of share some perspectives from the pharmaceutical company agenda in terms of how digital transformation can improve access to essential medicines and strengthen health systems. George, over to you.
Okay, Jane, thank you very much for your kind introduction. I'm pleased to have this opportunity to speak to you all. Today, I'd like to talk about how the digital transformation can improve the access and affordability of healthcare. I take what Daiichi Sankyo and the pharmaceutical industry are doing as an example. Daiichi Sankyo is a Japanese pharmaceutical company committed to its mission contribute to the enrichment of quality of life around the world through the creation of innovative pharmaceuticals. This corporate mission definitely matches the SDGs Goal 3, ensure healthy lives and promote well-being for all at all ages. To fulfill this mission, we have set 3 pillars of our policy on healthcare access. Those are the creation of innovative pharmaceuticals, improvement of access to pharmaceuticals, and the enforcement of healthcare infrastructures. Including Daiichi Sankyo, many pharmaceutical companies are currently making utmost effort in research and development of COVID-19 vaccine and therapeutic agents. Usually it takes over 10 years from research and development to launch of a new pharmaceutical product. But we are working hard to deliver a COVID-19 vaccine and therapeutic agent to patients as early as possible. For the production of major vaccines, such as flu vaccines, chicken eggs are commonly used. work for manufacturing COVID-19 vaccines. Therefore, the new technologies such as messenger RNA and DNA technologies are being used for the development of COVID-19 vaccines. Production facilities for vaccine is normally established after the vaccine is proved to be effective and safe. But to accelerate the supply of vaccines, companies started to prepare vaccine production facilities under the cooperation of governments worldwide at the risk of loss in case the development vaccine is not effective nor safe. For COVID-19 therapeutic agents, we are utilizing what we call drug repositioning. By testing an existing drug products with established safety profile as a candidate, we can omit preclinical studies in animals and clinical studies in humans for safety. By doing so, we can shorten the development period considerably if the compound works. COVID-19 is one of the infectious diseases which human society has been and will continue to be facing. To prepare for further risk of new infectious disease, the advancement of digital transformation is extremely important. Advancing digital transformation will be able to respond to new infectious disease more effectively because, for example, by having the development periods be much shortened. Establishment and utilization of medical big data generated from patient medical records are key to digital transformation in the field of healthcare and new drug development. In clinical practice, genomic data can be used to select the best treatment for individual patients and to provide therapeutic agents with higher efficacy and less side effect. It is what we call precision medicine. In the field of new drug development, medical big data and genomic data enable us to quickly find out appropriate novel drug targets. In conventional clinical studies, in conventional clinical trials, we have to administer a placebo to study subject in a control arm to evaluate a candidate drug. However, medical big data allow us to use historical control data instead of actual patient control study. Therefore, it will be possible to develop a new drug more quickly with less burden of study patients at lower cost. In the event of emergency like COVID-19 pandemic, accumulating, sharing, and utilizing data on a real-time basis enable us to quickly provide medical care and control the spread of infectious disease. Although it takes a huge amount of money and time to establish medical big data, it is more than a cost, but an important investment for the future to realize the SDGs Goal 3. This is the end of my presentation.
Thank you very much, Nakayama-san. And I think very, very importantly, something we often forget is this combination of digital innovation with life sciences innovation, and the collective impact of digital technology and life sciences and material sciences is remarkable. And then secondly, and you've given us a great example, it's not just about the technology, it is also about the business models and the sort of the collaboration to harness and leverage that technology, whether it's in health or education or energy or other sources. So thank you for those great examples. I see we have some of your colleagues joining from Brazil, and I would like to remind participants, if you have questions, start putting them in the chat, the chat field. But Sunita, I'd like to come to you now from UNICEF's perspective. We've heard about some financial innovation, the telehealth and medical innovation. What are some of your thoughts from UNICEF's perspective and what you're doing both to harness digital technology and work with the business sector?
Jane. Just I'm going to check that you can see my screen. I'm just give me 1 second.
I think they've put your slides up, so I think you're all set. So
I'm just, that's actually me. I'm just going to see that that's going to go full screen, because then we can, I think the view is better. Apologies.
I'm not sure if you're able to do that.
Does that work?
I'm not sure. I think we'll probably need to, yep. It's working for some and not for others. So I think if we just.
Okay, let's just continue then. I'm going to try one last thing, if you don't mind. Let's see if this works.
We are hearing, yes, wide screen now from one of our participants. So I think we're set.
Widescreen, great. Okay, then let's keep it where we are. Yeah. Fantastic. Yes, Jane, so thanks so much. And thank you so much to KEIDANREN. We've been partners over the last couple of years, and we've had opportunity to share our work on several occasions with the network. So thank you for that opportunity, and also specifically to Takeda, who recently joined us as a partner, supporting some of the work that I'm going to be speaking about today. So it's great to have this opportunity. Yeah, I'll be speaking specifically about sort of two aspects of our work, and really how we're also partnering with the private sector to not only develop new solutions, but also to deliver those solutions that so far have those solutions to the people who have so far remained excluded. I think in the recent months, we've seen how the digital divide and gap can really needs to be closed with some investments in underlying infrastructure. And I'll be speaking a little bit about both of those today. So the first initiative I wanted to flag is the Unicef Venture Fund. And again, Takeda has recently joined us as a strategic partner on the Venture Fund, which is the first venture capital vehicle within the UN, which we use to invest in what we call digital public goods. These are open source solutions that try and leverage frontier technology areas to meet some of the big programmatic needs that UNICEF faces, and really what we identify as 1 billion plus person needs. What are some of the really big challenges that, of course, in UNICEF's case, children and young people in their communities face? And so to date, we've made about 100 investments in open source solutions across 57 countries. Our focus is very much on identifying new digital solutions that come from the countries that UNICEF works in. So these are emerging and developing markets. And with the fund, we're hoping to redirect and make available some of this venture capital, this risk capital that allows entrepreneurs and the private sector to develop new solutions, to try new things, to apply some of these scaling technologies to the big problems that we're all looking to solve together. Just to give you a flavor and a taste of the kinds of solutions that we've invested in, and I think really particularly in the context of COVID-19 and the needs that we have to work in new ways, connect in new ways, seek health services in new ways, and also make financial transactions in new ways. These solutions really excite us, and because we see the potential of them growing and having a significant impact on how we as an organization, but of course also the governments we partner with, the private sector partners we work with, can do their business. So Giraffe, for instance, a company in South Africa that's developed a job matching portal that connects employers and job seekers using artificial intelligence. A company from Kenya called Angaza Elimu, who have a digital learning platform for adaptive assessment. So that means that really the content that children and young people can have access to adapts according to the specific needs, the particular learning gaps, for instance, that a child might be facing at the time. Illisoft, actually a graduate of the Venture Fund, so a company we invested in a few years ago, that's developed an open source chatbot platform that works across multiple languages, I believe at this point 30 plus. And we've applied that actually to a number of different uses. It can be used to provide an interactive forum for people to ask questions about COVID-19. We've seen the potential also of chatbots to provide information to young women and girls around menstrual health and hygiene. And so really a range of applications, particularly looking at how that kind of communication can be scaled beyond what an individual person, for instance, could handle in terms of answering requests for information. Another platform that I'd like to highlight here today that's received significant investment from UNICEF and our partners over the last couple of years is leveraging big data for the COVID response. And this is a platform that we have lovingly over the last couple of years called Magic Box, and that leverages data provided to us by private as well as public partners, layers that data to provide new insights. One of the, of course, very timely areas where we're looking to use these insights is around epidemic responses. And so we've done this in the past around the Ebola response, Zika, and now over the last couple of months, of course, COVID-19, focusing on the socioeconomic and secondary impacts of the response. And so by that, we mean, what are the responses of school closures, for instance, of restrictions in mobility? And it allows us to have a look at how those impacts affect different parts of a society in different ways. How were poorer communities affected by these responses in different ways than rich ones, for instance. And here, we're able to do that in real time, and that's really the new piece of this platform, is that we're not dependent on in-person surveys, which of course you can imagine during this time would be very difficult to do, but really allows us to track the impact of policies in real time and adjust accordingly as we may need. What do we do? How do we take some of these solutions to scale? And this is where our team has been working very closely with the Secretary General's roadmap on digital cooperation that has two key recommendations that Unicef has been very honored that we've been asked to take those forward. One of them relates to the creation of digital public goods. And these are exactly the kinds of digital solutions that I've just been speaking about. They're digital solutions, software, data, content, designs that are placed on open source licenses and therefore can be scaled and adapted and deployed more quickly in the countries that need them the most. So what the Digital Public Goods Alliance aims to do is actually identify and source, assess based on common technical standards, and channel further technical and financial investment into these digital solutions. We've also built a platform that you can access at digitalpublicgoods.net, a database of over 400 open source solutions, content, and data sets that could be accessible. We then join in close partnership with Pathfinder countries that deploy those solutions at scale and really generate very valuable lessons that help us guide further digital transformation at scale across different countries and regions. But as over the couple of years we've been making these investments in digital solutions, we constantly came across the challenge that to date about half of the world's population still does not have internet access. And so while these digital solutions have a tremendous impact on the lives of those that are connected, we further marginalize and isolate those that don't from the opportunities that digital solutions could present to them. Yeah. And this is where we've come together with the International Telecommunications Union to launch GIGA, an initiative to connect every young person in the world to information, opportunity, and choice. We specifically focus on schools and the communities around schools and have developed a real-time mapping platform that allows us to show school location as well as their connectivity status. And we've seen in some countries, such as Kyrgyzstan, the example presented here, that this platform just in and of itself has already allowed governments to make significant savings in their education connectivity budget. What this tool allows us to do is provide a new accountability mechanism that can show where connectivity is being delivered, where there might be gaps, whether services are being provided in time, and make sure that public resources are being allocated to this now very crucial service in a timely manner. This platform now maps 800,000 schools in 25 countries and provides the basis of GIGA as a platform that brings together private and public investors to scale universal access to affordable connectivity for all.
Fantastic.
The value proposition, I'll wrap up here, Jane, is really to resolve information gaps, improve conditions for financing, because we've often seen that conditions for financing for connectivity mean that the most marginalized remain excluded if there's not a strong business case that encourages private sector to provide connectivity to all, launch national common bids that are backed by new financing, and create sustainable structures that allows for that connectivity to be delivered in a sustainable way. So thank you so much for the opportunity to present on this work very quickly today, and be happy to answer any questions.
Great, thanks, Sunita. And in fact, if you could put in the chat some of the links you mentioned so our participants can get more information, that would be good. But again, I think two very important points, this concept of digital public goods. and that, some things we do need to make a public good and collaborate as public goods. And at the same time, even the UN can set up ventures and venture funds that are competitive and really inspire entrepreneurship and competitive investing. So thanks for that. And I'd like to, last but certainly not least, come to you, Michelle. And if you could just sort of share your perspective on this this challenge of accelerating digital transformation, from the perspective of one of the world's largest asset managers.
Great, thanks, Jane, and thanks to my fellow panelists. So BlackRock is an asset management company, as many of you will know. We manage just over $7 trillion on behalf of our clients. And this point about on behalf of our clients is very important because it informs the way we approach these evolving macro issues. What are the steps that we can take as an asset management firm, as a service provider to our clients, to help them invest in ways that capture these opportunities and avoid the risks as the economy transforms? And we do that in a number of different ways. So BlackRock, on the equity investment strategies, is predominantly investing in index strategies. So BlackRock's clients own holdings across each market, and many of them are globally diversified. We also have active equity strategies. So in those types of strategies, our portfolio managers are taking into consideration the evolving opportunity set for the companies that they could be investing in. And then we have a very big investment portfolio relating to real assets. So obviously some of the things on the ground that help with the transformation that we're all very focused on here today. But for a lot of what we do, the investment stewardship work of the team that I am part of is key, because our clients are long-term investors across the market, as I mentioned. And so what we are trying to do for clients is integrate environmental, social, and governance factors, sustainability factors, including issues around the transformation in the economy, into both the product range that we offer clients, so they can choose to allocate their assets to those types of themes, and in terms of our investment stewardship work. Now, investment stewardship is the dialogue that we have with those public companies that our clients are invested in to encourage the corporate governance and sustainable business practices that support long-term shareholder value creation. And key to that that sustainable business practice concept is how companies are setting out a long-term strategy, a multi-year strategy. And a subset of that is how companies identify the key impacts that their business has in society and the key dependencies. And this is hugely important because unless investors have a very clear sense of those impacts and dependencies, it's very hard to assess how well a company is being run and whether it truly is being run for long-term sustainable financial returns, which is what our clients depend on to meet their savings goals. And then the third very important part of this is reporting. And BlackRock is a strong advocate for reporting aligned with the recommendations of the Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosure, not just for climate-related disclosures, but we think the intellectual construct is equally applicable for other environmental and social dynamics in a company's business. And we can certainly talk about that later if that's of interest. And what we've seen, along with others, and people have mentioned it here today already, is that many of the long-term trends that we've observed in the economy, including digitalization and massive technological shifts, have accelerated in the last 9 months as a result of the COVID pandemic and the huge impact that that's had on people and society and the economy. And clearly, technology has been very supportive of some of the shift in the way people are working, some of the shifts in the way people are staying connected, but it's also, to the points that Sunita raised, really the divide between those who have access to technology and those who do not. And so this clearly leads to a huge business opportunity across sectors for innovation and research and development and investment in their business sort of processes to enhance the way companies produce their products and serve their clients. And what we're really looking for in these conversations that we're having with companies is how they're thinking through adapting their business, adapting their processes to make their business more resilient, which then in aggregate will make the economy more resilient. And in particular, for many, many companies, what we're looking at is how they're enhancing operational efficiency using technology, including enhancing their product offering for clients, how they're using technology to enhance the traceability of products in their supply chain, because that's been a huge challenge over the years, how they're monitoring their supply chain and their business processes to ensure efficiency and also minimization of negative impacts, and then using technology in reporting. And what we have seen in the very recent time, and clearly a lot of announcements coordinated with Climate Week, is more and more companies making public these plans to transform their businesses, to make their businesses more sustainable and more resilient. And we think that's hugely important because the private sector has a very important role to play. And I think the corporate leaders who get out in front and take advantage of being a first mover are going to position their companies really, really well and also help the economy transition in a way that I think shows real leadership. On that, I'll hand it back to you, Jane.
Great. No, thank you, Michelle. And again, I think for all of you who are listening on the line, if you're working in business and you're thinking, what should we be doing? I think it's a really clear message, strengthen your corporate governance, the sustainable business practices. And as Michelle, I think, illustrated so well, the sustainable business practices are about identifying and managing and mitigating the risks, but also looking at how business models, technologies, and other things can change to have a positive impact and be able to demonstrate that. And then thirdly, you have the metrics and the reporting that you're transparent about your performance. So I think a very clear sort of agenda for action for those listening from the business side. So thank you. And now I'd like to sort of open up. I'm sort of seeing a number of questions coming through on the chat box, and I think one of the common sets of questions that is coming through is around this question of how do we make sure that some of the benefits of digital transformation get shared more broadly, with lower income communities, households, but also with developing countries. And what are some of the lessons that have been learned, and also some of the models for expanding access and opportunities in developing countries and for more vulnerable households and small businesses. And George, maybe we could sort of start with you on that question. How do we scale this up in developing countries? And then I'll come, Sunita, to you and then to our other panelists. George? Yep. So, yep.
So, yes, thank you. I believe that the digital transformation in healthcare can accelerate the development of innovative drugs at lower cost and dramatically improve the access to healthcare and affordability. Particularly in case of infectious disease, there are many patients in Asia and Africa. We'll be able to create the superior drug by bringing together the clinical data from Asia and Africa and innovative pharmaceutical technologies. In addition, if clinical data can be integrated with regional specific genetic mutation and the disease characteristic through the digital transformation, we can identify the gene mutations and disease characteristic unique to the region. And that will enable us to rapidly deliver the drugs suitable in the developing countries. Digital transformation and cooperation between developed and developing countries will lead to the creation of superior drugs and accelerate our SDG achievement. Now, I'd like to slightly touch on the investment fund that the pharmaceutical industries is also using to contribute to SDGs. One of the examples is Global Health Technology Fund, or GHIT Fund, in short, Japanese-initiated projects. The GHIT Fund is an international non-profit organization that invests in development of new but potentially low marketable drugs for the treatment of malaria, tuberculosis, and neglected tropical diseases. And it engages in raising funds through global public-private partnership. A number of domestic and international pharmaceutical companies, as well as the Japanese government and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and the Wellcome Trust are participating. The GHIT Fund has raised more than $200 million in total and invested the funds in 91 projects. Of these, 6 projects have been proceeded to clinical studies, and 2 projects aim at obtaining the regulatory approval by 2022.
Yeah.
And it is very unique that pharmaceutical companies participating in this fund are proactively working to share a number of their technologies and insights to develop products through this partnership.
Great. Well, thank you. And I think another great practical example, we've heard when we're looking at financing, particularly financing for developing countries, there's the Daiwa Society 5.0 fund, so an individual financial institution setting up its own fund, the Unicef fund, where Unicef is a public institution but is bringing in private partners of funding, and then this great example of the pharmaceutical sector in Japan coming together as an industry and setting up a joint fund which is combining both funding but also technology innovation and technology support. So 3 very practical, real models. Now, if the pharmaceutical sector in every country did something like that, or the agribusiness sector did something like that, that would be a great way to mobilize resources. So thank you for that example. And Sunita, I mean, you've obviously given us a couple of examples, but any other key takeaways on how we bridge the gap between developed and developing countries?
Yeah, thanks, Jane. I think a few things. One of them is to reconsider how we define scale. That scale is not always about reaching numbers, but it also depends on whom we reach. UNICEF, for instance, has an equity agenda where we say we focus on the bottom quintile, because the investments made in the bottom quintile have a far greater return on overall development and overall returns. And so I think there's a big piece of when you ask about how do we reach scale and how do we take solutions to scale is very critically looking at what do we mean by scale, who is actually reached and who has access to some of these critical services so that we have the impact that we're looking for. I think the second piece that I probably already touched upon a little bit in the presentation about Giga is looking at incentives, right? And looking at where and how value is generated and where that value is captured. And that we need to look at what incentive structures can be put in place, what levers can be moved so that all partners around the table have an incentive to make those investments. We need partners to kind of pool their resources, technical as well as financial. I think one thing that we're seeing is that often, if we speak about technology in particular, that value is still generated and captured by few big players in the technology industry, rather than looking at how we can shift some of that to the countries that we're speaking about, to make sure that local stakeholders generate that value and capture that value for the local economy and can have sustainability and profitability in the longer term. And so, that's one key aspect of Giga that we're looking at is how do we change the incentive structures? How do we improve returns and lower risk for those that, so that they're encouraged to invest in connectivity for all, as opposed to connectivity that's easy or that's immediately profitable in the short term. But similarly, when we look at whom we're investing in when it comes to developing new digital solutions, is how can we do that in a way that local players and local stakeholders develop those solutions, capture that value, own that data as well in the longer term. Because I think that's really what we have to look at, is changing some of those structures, reallocating some of those resources so that we see that shift towards the countries that have the greatest potential to really undergo that transformation in the coming years.
Great, no, fantastic. And I think the theme that Michelle also picked up of being really intentional about impact, and part of that impact is the value sharing. You know, who gets the value along a particular you know, product or value chain. And so thank you for that insight. And coming back to the sort of the financing question, Takashi-san, you showed a slide, you know, of the growth in ESG investing, and the fact that, you know, most of it is still focused on negative screening, risk management. And I think, as Michelle, you know, indicated, that's beginning to change. But, you know, could you just share some thoughts on, you know, where you see the financial sector going, and you know, the most innovative possibilities around accelerating digital transformation? And then I'll come to you, Michelle, with the same question. Yeah.
Okay. First of all, the investors themselves need to understand that Society 5.0 through digital transformation will help achieve the SDGs. On that basis, the investors should talk to companies that digital technologies for the achievement of the SDGs will make their own business sustainable. At the same time, financial institutions should use their collective wisdom to deliver financial products that are related to Society 5.0. As I mentioned in my presentation, Daiwa Securities Group has developed a Society 5.0 related stock fund. It's also important to promote investment for the realization of Society 5.0 through efforts such as development of Society 5.0 related stock indices. I would like to mention the securities industry's efforts to use capital markets to contribute to the SDGs as well. The Japan Securities Dealers Association made an SDGs declaration in 2017. As an initiative of the declaration, bonds that contribute to the SDGs, such as green bonds and social bonds, are named SDGs bonds in Japan. The entire securities industry of Japan is working to enhance sustainable finance. Daiwa Securities Group has been playing a leading role in this area ever since we arranged the issue of Japan's first impact investment bond, namely a Bakshin bond for individual investors in 2008. The total value of SDGs bond issued in Japan last year amounted to 1.4 trillion yen, or 13.13 billion US dollars. While this is not a huge sum from a global perspective, it presents a 200% increase on the previous fiscal year. So we can expect the market to expand going forward.
Great, no, thank you. And I think, again, you know, some great examples there, which hopefully our UN colleagues can pick up, because of, you know, every securities association in every country did a similar thing. You know, it's both about incentives as well as having the platform. So great example. Michelle.
Yeah, I'll just add one thing, because I think people have covered many key points, and that is what we are seeing is a really significant shift in how our clients as long-term investors want to invest their savings, their assets. And this brings it back to companies, and companies being able to demonstrate how they're thinking about this transformation, how they're investing in it, and what impact they're having. And this is where I think, from a slightly different angle than really we've been talking about here so far, the technology can help companies demonstrate that impact that they're having, which helps investors structure portfolios and products, if you will, for long-term asset owners to invest in. That moves the money to those companies that are really at the leading edge.
Yeah, no, I think, again, a very, very important example of harnessing digital capabilities, and digital capabilities for transparency of both business transparency, but also government transparency. And I think as we, need to hold both our governments and our businesses to account. So another great example. I mean, and sort of building on some of the other questions we've had, George, can I come back to you to sort of share some thoughts on other sort of leadership examples in the pharmaceutical sector around health? And you talked about the Japanese pharmaceutical sector working together. It seems like there's more coalitions globally now as well to share data, to share digital capabilities around both research and development, but also improving access to medicines. And are you seeing the Japanese companies partnering increasingly with European and American and African and Indian pharmaceutical companies to move this agenda forward?
Yes, well, I believe that the digital transformation has the potential to play an important role in healthcare to achieve SDGs Goal 3. However, there are several specific challenges that must be solved for digital transformation to have a real impact to healthcare. Digital transformation, including construction of medical big data, will take an enormous amount of money and labors, but we should view it as an important investment for the future in order to achieve SDGs Goal 3. Once we establish a social system for collecting medical and genomic information, data sharing at the global level will allow not only developed countries, but also developing countries to gain important medical and health outcomes. In order to move forward with these activities, you need a robust data security system that people will be able to provide their information with no anxiety. To balance data sharing and data security is very critical in advancement of the digital transformation. Digital transformation is a means to deliver the tangible results, and its goal is to achieve the SDGs. Clarifying and sharing these objectives with people worldwide will strongly accelerate the digital transformation, I believe.
No, thank you. And again, I think another very, very important point that hasn't come out so far, that there's this incredible potential with digital transformation and data use. But first, there's the question that, Sunita, you emphasized of equity and access to that data. And there's the question of privacy and ownership of that data, and making sure that, going back to Michelle's point, we're very conscious about the impact and mitigating unintentional consequences, while also harnessing, obviously, the enormous potential of the data. So thank you for raising that point. I can see that we are, unfortunately, almost out of time. So what I would like to do is just ask each of you, I know we have a lot of young people joining both this session and the UN meetings generally this year. What would be your closing comment, sort of next generation leaders, on what are one or two key things we need to get right so that digital transformation will benefit people and the Sustainable Development Goals as we move forward? What would be your 1 to 2 closing messages for action? And I'll do slightly different order. Sunita, if I can come to you first. 1 to 2 closing.
That's a tough one. I would say I would probably start with those of you who are actually looking to design and build new solutions, is to design and build for those contexts that are the lowest infrastructure ones. We used to say, if you can design a self-driving car for Burundi, it'll drive everywhere. If you design it only for San Francisco, chances are it won't work anywhere else. And so really look at sort of those environments that have the greatest need for these solutions. And then probably the second one is the point I made earlier around, let's not just build new solutions, but let's look at how some of the underlying systems need to change and need to be redesigned. And so what can we as young people do to kind of, I include myself, definitely not in that definition anymore, but what can young people do to sort of question some of the systems that so far have meant that resources have probably been allocated for the few rather than to those countries and communities that could really take that change into their own hands and develop and scale those solutions themselves.
Yeah, fantastic. The specific solutions and systems change. Thank you. Takashi-san, closing comment from you.
Okay. Without that, digital natives like young leaders will play the leading role in the realization of Society 5.0 and the achievement of the SDGs. I want the people who will shoulder further eras to take ownership of the SDGs and discover issues in a more real way. And by using cutting-edge technologies to solve those issues, it will give rise to innovation that will change the world. And since the Society 5.0 concept was first proposed in 2017 in Japan, the scale of investment in startups has increased tenfold in 10 years. Also, new Japanese Prime Minister Suga has given a clear indication to give top priority to accelerate the digitalization of Japanese society as a whole by setting up a digital agency that will lead this digitalization and combining it with regulatory reforms. As this shows, in Japan, the government and companies are cooperating very closely to develop an environment that will make it easier for young leaders to realize Society 5.0 and the achievement of the SDGs. So once the coronavirus pandemic has settled down, we really hope you young leaders will come to Japan and play a very important part in this exciting trend. Thank you.
Thank you. George-san, any final comment from you before I come to Michelle?
Really appreciate this opportunity and communicate, although the time is ending, but this is a very rare opportunity that pharmaceutical company will be welcome to hear what they are saying. So I'm very glad to be here.
Thank you.
And I'm glad you listen to us. Thank you.
Thank you. Michelle?
I would just say to think about those things where you really have a unique advantage and focus and be aware of what others are doing that complement what you are doing, but focus and deliver on something really definite rather than trying to duplicate effort of others or go too thin.
Great. No, thank you. And I think just very, very quickly from my side, sort of three key messages that come out. Your digital transformation is absolutely crucial, but it's not just about scale. It's about being intentional about the impact and focusing on the core competencies that your organization can add. And it's not just about the technology, it is also about the business models. So takeaway number one. Number two, both for companies but also investors who want to get it right, it's how do you look at these issues from a corporate governance perspective, from a sort of sustainable business practices and responsible business practices perspective, and in terms of setting goals and metrics and reporting and being transparent on those. And for your general ESG, thinking about how digital transformation embeds in your ESG strategy. So almost ESG and D is what we should be thinking about. And then third, no matter what each individual organization can do on their own, we've got to think at the systems level. We understand that there are these systemic challenges. And so the type of examples we've heard today where the pharmaceutical sector comes together, so industry-wide coalitions, or where business, academic institutions work together on research, or where the UN works with companies, we've got to have this collective action to overcome some of the systemic obstacles and systemic challenges we face. to making sure that digital transformation is not only efficient and innovative and creative, but is designed and delivered with impact and ultimately benefit to people and planet at the absolute heart of the process. So thank you very much for everyone who's joined us today, for our wonderful panel, for KEIDANREN for bringing us together and being such a role model yourselves as collective business leadership. And we'll leave it at that. And thank you for being with us.
Thank you
Thank you
very much. Bye-bye.
Good night.
Take care. Thank you all. Thanks.
Thank you.
And I think they'll be doing a summary which they'll send to us all afterwards. So thank you. Thanks to all of our participants.
Thank you.